Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news, and going into the second half of the season, Max Verstappen, despite his and Red Bull's substantial championship lead, has welcomed Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton back into the title fight, saying the championship theoretically is not quite over yet, and Lewis Hamilton coming into the mix and George Russell as well will potentially take points away from Ferrari and lock up the championship that much easier for Verstappen himself. Very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you are new as always, I'd greatly appreciate it. This I thought was rather interesting from a Horner, first of all, mentioning that Hamilton was kind of in conversation with Red Bull to switch to them back in the McLaren days. He says, Lewis and I have had some conversations over the years. From 2010 to 2013, he was very interested in driving for Red Bull. At the time, however, we had Vettel, and it would make no sense to have two alpha drivers. Something really interesting about like the quote alpha drivers, saying that, of course, you know, Vettel and Webber as it was at the time. Vettel was obviously the number one guy, as it is today at Red Bull, really, with Verstappen and Perez. Like, it's a similar dynamic in play where they've got their number one guy, even though they might not explicitly say it to the public. That's just kind of how it is. Mercedes, of course, with the Bottas era, have approached it in a similar way, but I thought it was interesting just the fact that he mentions here that they don't really like having two quote-unquote alpha drivers in a team. So is he calling Webber the beta driver, right? Or I guess Perez the beta driver? I guess that's technically true, but I just thought it was an interesting turn of phrase that they didn't really want two guys, like, you know, two Sigma males fighting it out for the victory. You know, that could cause chaos. They want a number one guy and they want a number two guy, implicitly or explicitly, which is probably what this indicates. Of course, Hamilton ends up making the intelligent move to Mercedes for the turbo hybrid era. David Coulthard, though, has said that this championship battle is far from over, saying that, you know, Hamilton coming into play or Mercedes coming into play could mix things up a little bit, right? What it probably means, though, Mercedes obviously have already been and should be expected to continue taking points off the top dogs, Ferrari and Red Bull. Who they take points off more often than not, though, is maybe going to be a big implicating factor in who wins this championship. If Ferrari are 1-2 every race and Mercedes are 3-4 every race and Red Bull are 5th, 6th every race, then of course the championship gap closes much more quickly if Charles Leclerc was to take a lot of victories if Verstappen's down in 5th or 6th. Now the reality is it could of course be an entirely different story with it happening precisely the other way around. That's what Max Verstappen is hoping for, and honestly he has good reason to think this, right? Because of Ferrari's strategic mess-ups and also technical issues and the like, it's more likely that, you know, if Ferrari fall short, instead of placing 3rd or 4th as they might do with kind of limiting factor, they're now placing 5th or 6th or 4th and 6th as they were most recently, of course, in Hungary, too, because Mercedes were both ahead of them on the podium, right? So I think Verstappen has good reason to believe that Mercedes coming into the fight actually helps him more than it helps Ferrari, because, look, if you go into a weekend thinking which team's going to 1-2, is it going to be Red Bull or Ferrari, you're probably still going to take Red Bull right now, because at least they can deliver a car to the finish line in the most efficient possible way. This is what Verstappen has to say. It's good that they, that being Mercedes, are competitive because they can steal more points off of Ferrari, so I'm very happy that they are doing well. So saying, yes, Hamilton coming back into the fray, as with George Russell, is good for Verstappen because it limits how easy it is for Ferrari and Charles Leclerc to start putting up points. Now, of course, in the same breath, they can also take points off Verstappen, but let's say Mercedes miraculously became the dominant force of the second half of the year and they 1-2'd every race. Like, that means great for Verstappen, right? Because if Verstappen finishes 3rd every race behind a dominant Mercedes 1-2, like, Charles Leclerc can't catch up many points. If Charles Leclerc is 3rd and Verstappen's like 4th or 5th, he gains like such limited points every race that it's practically irrelevant. So Mercedes being competitive is effectively going to lock up the championship of Verstappen, unless all of a sudden it's Ferrari and Mercedes that are way quicker than Red Bull and Verstappen is struggling to deliver podiums. In that case, then the championship still could be alive. So these words could come back to bite Verstappen, right? If Mercedes do all of a sudden just start to win races and Leclerc's winning races as well, and it's kind of doesn't work out so well for Red Bull if they start to focus on next year's car more so than this year's car. But realistically, he probably has a fair point that Hamilton being back in the fight is good to kind of, well, ensure that the 80 points gap that he currently has over Leclerc is probably going to get maintained from now to the rest of the year. Just a quick thing to mention as well on Aston Martin before we close out the video, because of course we saw that this kind of innovative idea with their rear wing design in Hungary, which seemed to deliver them some performance. This is obviously a loophole in the rules. The teams weren't meant to be able to design something that came up at the side of the rear wings like this, looking rather like last year's rear wing, because it should make the dirty air off the back of the wing worse, like it was last year, making it more difficult to follow, arguably against the spirit of the regulations. If, however, the FIA ratifies this and says it's okay, because they've used this loop design here, I think because of some sort of surface area rule, and by using this loop, they can get around the rules that's meant to prevent you doing things like this. But if the FIA says, okay, it's okay, the rules say it's okay, and nobody protests, because if anything, Aston Martin being at the back of the grid most of the time, at least in qualifying, no one's really going to protest it. So they imagine and they expect rivals to copy this, right? Singapore, that Grand Prix, definitely another very high downforce circuit like Hungary. So we may well see ideas like this around there, especially because even I think Red Bull and Christian Horner said that, like, look, Aston Martin, maybe we'll have to copy something from them this time rather than the other way around. And of course, Red Bull, we know they've got great straight line speeds, but in the corners they're a little bit weaker. Then maybe that's going to be a key difference maker for them as well come Singapore in maybe 5 or 6 races time from now, maybe 5 races time or something along those lines. And just to say this as well, right, on Christian Horner and Seb Vettel, because we talked about them earlier in the video, saying that he believes it's probably about time for Vettel to step away. It's not right and he doesn't deserve to be driving around in the middle of the fields. And maybe people will think similar about Fernando Alonso if he has a couple of difficult seasons at Aston Martin to come. But very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you are new as always, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.